It is my pleasure to introduce our first reader tonight, Hannah Lowell. Hannah grew up in Fostoria, Ohio, and went through high school because, according to her, high school is something we go through in Bascom, Ohio. When asked what the best thing was that happened during her BFA experience, Hannah said, "I suppose having my first encounter with the self-proclaimed hag, Stephanie, at an Inklings meeting in the education building when she was giving a PowerPoint presentation about hags." I'm sure there's a story there, but it's one you may have to wait to hear, and if Hannah decides to tell it, you'll know it has value. Hannah's perspective is always thought-provoking and comes with insight that elicits deeper understanding. It is deliberate and revealing, characteristics that make her stories engaging to any reader. Her perspective on writing is no exception. She says, "I believe writing demands a patience we don't warn each other about. We cannot expect anything, our work, our success, our best ideas, to come to us all at once, or at the same time as anyone else's. We cannot even demand that we be seen. We are all snails, really, moving slowly along the ether, and we owe ourselves and each other that understanding, that you and I, we are just snails, with no idea where we are heading. Only that, for now at least, we are all in this corner of the ether at the same time." And in this ether, she says she tends to write about love, not romantic love, but platonic love, though not in the sense of Plato's ideal and perfect love. Hannah says it still contains its own depths and complications because alongside it, I'd also write about death, absence, and despair. I feel that love is illustrated most strongly and most interestingly in these situations. So tonight, there's love. It may be complicated and paired with a bit of despair, but it's all deliberate. Consider this your warning. We're just snails. We're stuck in this ether together. We have no idea where we're heading, and neither do her characters. We have to be patient. They have to learn they're just snails. We have to wait for them in the ether until they understand. Please help me welcome Hannah.
Okay. So everyone can hear me, right? Yes? A little bit. Okay. Cool. Like that? So here is the wait. It takes place in the 80s, and it's about two people who are trapped in the parking lot for psychological reasons, I guess. So here we go. Having finally torn his tongue off the roof of his mouth, Duke said into the noon quiet, "I would cut off my foot if it grew us a shade tree." Just beside him was as still as the parked cars. Like them, she was a machine of movement forced idle for a time. "He should be here," she said in response. They were standing in a Walmart parking lot at its very outskirts just off I-75. Both of their cars were slotted next to each other, but they stood by her car. Jess plucked at the antenna on her powder blue Ford Escort, and this was how Duke noted that she was nervous, though she hid her eyes behind a pair of aviators. They had gotten out of work together and were waiting for her brother, who was supposed to be returning from the airport. Another bead of sweat rolled down her shoulder blade. Duke tried to joke. Maybe the heat killed him. Jess persisted. "Sam said he would meet us here." Duke wanted to go home. He wanted to go home to his lonely little apartment, but his jaw was doing that thing again where it felt wired shut. He wanted to talk to Jess about her brother, maybe about everything else, but his tongue was stuck to the roof of his mouth like humid cottonseed, the kind that clumped up and stuck to brick walls in early summer. Outside the pub where he and Jess worked, he had seen something like that, like cottonseed on the wall once. It was caught up underneath some graffiti of a geometric black cat. Then again, the white stuff on the wall may have just been strange fungus, hard to tell in their run pile. And once he had seen fungus look like wet cottonseed. It had bloomed on a loaf of bread he could not afford to toss out. He had debated whether he could safely cut the fungus part off. He could recall his grandmother once prattling on about how they had done just that during the Depression in the 30s, but he was no fungus expert. He could have walked down to the library to get a book on bad fungus, a good kind with pictures, but that seemed a lot of effort and he could just risk it. So he did. That had been, a month ago? He was still alive, so it sure seemed like maybe Granny had the right ideas. He was preoccupied with the sweat rolling down his back under his black jacket, so focused on it that he could visualize each bead as it stopped on the fabric of his shirt. He shuddered, though it was sweltering. Jess was leaning against the car door, apparently oblivious to its searing heat. The heat rose off the blacktop and the glass and the metal and the rubber tires. She was brown and freckled, and her expression was indiscernible under the sunglasses, but Duke guessed that her eyes were resting on the horizon. After a long shift, whenever they sat on the concrete steps of the back door of the pub, Jess would balance the filter of a cigarette precarious between her teeth and gaze at the sliver of horizon visible between the apartment buildings. When Duke lifted his gaze, all he saw was the bleached blue sky and the white sun. "Jess," he said to the sun. He could feel his volume on the verge of rising. Whatever he was about to say next, it was about to be very loud, so he choked himself off. "We can't leave without him." Jess could be facing Duke directly, placid behind her aviators, gaze perhaps locked on his pallid face, even through the tinted lenses. Duke wouldn't know, as he kept his eyes on the sun. Under his eyelids, the sun was a red spot. If he moved his eyes back and forth, the spot followed. Locusts screamed and hissed in a crescendo, then slowed into a hum only to repeat. He'd always thought locusts lived in trees, but there were no trees here. Had they evolved to survive hellish swaths of cement? Once in the pub, an old man had talked at length of locusts, something about them blotting the sun, Duke thought, but that could have been someone else's tale. As the bartender, Duke was often subjected to strange stories from stranger patrons. Unfortunately, all of that old man's wisdom was lost to Duke now. What were those tales Jess's brother used to recount to him? Sam would spin them theatrically from over the bar counter before he got supposedly shipped off to Michigan. Duke couldn't recall that either. Memories from the bar tended to blur together anyhow. Duke had been working in that seedy box of a building since he was 17, starting in the back as a dishwasher. And Jess had come along as a busgirl, singing Hard for Laughs when she slid the cups and plates onto the dish rack. They struck an amiable alliance quickly, over midnight conversations and complaints, mopping the kitchen. And while others amid them came and went off to college or better prospects, there was an unspoken recognition of sameness between the two, and being the ones who remained. Duke didn't have anywhere else, nothing tempting or immediate to go, and he caught the same cornered expression in Jess sometimes when she was wrapping her hundredths of silverware. But it wasn't all that maddening, when at least they each had the other to remember their birthday. Duke was still sweating, only now his shirt was soaked and stuck to him, and when he rolled his shoulders, the places where it unstuck were very cold. The locusts were screaming. Maybe the locusts were not really amid them, and he was hearing them scream from somewhere far away. "I guess we could have waited in our cars," Jess said. Duke took his time pulling his tongue from the roof of his mouth, unclenching his jaw. He felt a wry smile pull over his face, but he could supply no sarcasm. It was hilarious because this had not occurred to him either. He opened his eyes, and the parking lot was doubled and blurry for a moment. The sun was low. It was afternoon heat now. The cars made long, sharp shadows. When Jess turned her head to him, the orange light flashed off the golden rims of her shades. When she caught sight of his slight smile, the corner of her mouth rose too. He had once dreamt of making her grin every day. Presently he was sober, and he knew he had to settle for just sometimes. It was evening. Duke was sitting on the pavement with his curled back against the front tire of Jess's car, his elbows on his knees and his sweaty forehead resting on his linked fingers. On the other end of the parking lot, some asshole in a Cavalier was blasting Out of Touch from their radio, and Duke was beginning to hate the song on principle. He had stared at a pulverized saltine cracker for what could be minutes or an hour. He had bore witness to a cluster of scrambling ants as they dismantled the crumbs. His immediate reaction to the ants was disgust. It quickly simmered to indifference, then perked into intrigue. As he watched them, he had begun to admire their ceaseless absorption in their task. Presently, they had nearly reduced the saltine to specks. Duke was still left waiting for the cracker to disappear completely. He decided that he hated the ants, and considered shifting over and planting a shoe on the cluster of them, scraping away the remnants of saltine himself, but it seemed a Herculean task, so he just looked away. The edge of the sky was purple, late clouds of golden pink. All the while, Jess had been standing. The entire lifespan of the saltine, she'd been standing. The sun was finally setting, and she was still standing, stock still against the car door where she'd begun. Still she wore the aviators, and still she watched that strip of parking lot where it met the periwinkle sky. "Don't you think you could try calling someone?" Duke asked her. "Maybe there's a phone in the Walmart that lets use." "Call where?" she asked the horizon and moving. Duke imagined saying, "Well, I figure we could get to the phone before the store owner does, just in case he calls the cops on us for loitering." And then he imagined Jess and her unamused head tilt. It was a little lean back that rose her sharp chin and narrowed her eyes. She gave it to patrons at the bar who got too familiar. Duke lifted off the tire as if he made to rise, but he let himself fall back again instead. I don't know. The Detroit airport. Maybe phone his house. Maybe he forgot to meet us here. Duke considered saying, or phone Brighton and asked if he's still there, or if he ever even arrived. But he held his teeth tight together. Without looking down at him, she asked, "Why are you still here?" It felt to Duke like too big of a question. Why should he answer a question like that if she refused to answer his simple question? Then again, maybe she failed to realize how that question felt to him, what it made him wonder. He was still a bartender because he hated himself, or at least that's what he told himself, but perhaps in truth it was because he wanted to be near Jess. The vodka had driven his family off, and for a while, Jess was all he had. He wondered in his blacker nights what she thought of him, if he had changed quick enough, if he hated himself enough, if she really wanted to be near him. She may only know him as a good friend, but she had surely seen enough to know that he was no good for her and never would be. Surely she only tolerated him, perhaps, because his hopelessness reminded her of her wayward brother. Duke had told himself that after 5 years of working at the same pub together, Jess probably considered him a constant. And maybe that was something important to her because she had not had many constants. Duke knew he himself had little constants. The two of them had been raised in the same empty alleyways in little Ohio towns where trucks rattled off taking important things somewhere else. This was towing too close to the edge of the cliff. He tried desperately to backpedal. Well, I am thirsty. Let's go inside and get some Coke at least. He saw, because he was watching her intently, the corner of her mouth twitch. He was left unsure if she was suppressing a smile or a scowl. You can, she said. I don't want to miss him if he's lost and looking for us. Jess, Duke let himself say to the statue above him. He's not coming. He has to, she said. Clearly not, Duke thought. It tasted old and bitter and familiar, like vodka, so he swallowed it. Her head turned toward him. He caught it in his periphery. Night, evening dark, starless under the yellow light of towering lamps that bathed the cooling swath of pavement. Jess sat cross-legged on the wide blue hood of her dinky little Ford. The aviators were up off her face, perched on her forehead. She stared with her sharp black eyes into the void beyond the hard light of the lot now empty, save for their parallel cars and them. Jess had opened the driver door, fired up the Escort to put the headlights on. So he can see the lot's not empty, she had said. Her radio had turned on with their car. Every grain of sand was muttering static through her bent antenna. Duke reached in to turn the dial down and silenced Dylan, and on her dashboard he noticed a pink envelope, pristine under the dust and gum wrappers. It read Sam, in Jess's hasty pen that Duke recognized from border slips and receipts. Duke pulled himself out from the car as if fleeing a sour smell. He had abruptly recalled a story Sam had told him once at a bar. The guy had just come back from the bathroom and it had been abundantly clear to Duke that he was higher than a kite. Sorry, I just lost my place. Sam always told stories, but when he was high, his stories got strange. You ever hear about the cat, Sam had said, the cat that lives here? He's sad. Sad? Duke had asked, wiping down a glass and setting it with a clack. He was always just hoping that Jess was preoccupied, that she would fail to notice Sam in his unfocused eyes. He's sad, Sam said again. He wants to run far away, but he's trapped in the brick and he's rotting. Duke had stopped partway through wiping down the next glass. He's rotting, Sam had a knack for noting when he got your attention. He's rotting because he can't move, and where he's been standing, it's wet, really wet and gross. He stands there so long he starts drowning. In the wet? No, in the rot. Some sick, distant part of Duke didn't blame Sam. He couldn't blame him for not wanting to try. Duke was trying so hard every minute, and still he felt each day like he was treading water, waiting to break surface. This wasn't about him, though. He wasn't going to leave Jess in this lot, waiting for no one. Duke watched her. In part he was concerned, but in part he also wondered, hoped, that maybe if he stared at her hard enough, she would pull her eyes off the void and look at him. The two desires ebbed in and out of his awareness. He was also vaguely aware that he had taken her place, leaning against the car door. He wondered if he seemed as immobile to her as she did to him. Maybe we could look for him, he heard himself say. Jess shook her head. No. Duke was seized briefly with the wild image of shoving her off the car, but onto the ground, of taking her by the arms and shaking her. He wanted her to wake up. in one sharp motion, snapped the dust off of her like he knew he could snap the dust off a dish towel. Her brother was supposed to be done with rehab, but he wasn't coming back from it because he had never gone. Duke had suspected this, and now he was sure of it. His lungs filled with air that he was sure he was about to use for screaming. He exhaled. Jess looked at him. She locked her quick bird eyes onto his burning ones. Duke was reminded all at once that she was not rock solid, not, in fact, the machine she needed to pretend to be. Her bones were delicate and they had been broken before. He does this a lot, he reminded her quietly. She said, devoid of feeling. You were unreliable once, too. Like this? She was quiet. Duke had to tamp down anxiety, unsure if he answered himself. He had gone to rehab. He saw a therapist. That therapist made him take drugs that didn't always work like they were meant to. Had he taken the Zoloft today? He was failing to recall. Jess was asking, how do you do it? Duke stared at where he thought the saltine cracker used to be. It had disappeared completely. What? How do you keep trying? What? I don't want to give up on him, she said. Well, would he wait for you like this? He tried. Like you're waiting for him. Like I'm waiting for you. This thought was sudden, sticky, and sweet, like lukewarm syrup. He wanted to spit it out, desperately scrape it off his dry tongue. He swallowed it. She was still holding his eyes. He was suddenly terrified to look away, as if she had read that last thought. Slow, she broke first. She turned back to the boy. Duke jerked awake from sleep that was dreamless. When he woke, he was only more exhausted. He had sat down against the car tire again. The night seemed the same under the lamplight, but it had gotten colder. The jacket that was too hot at noon was too little now. He was shivering. His mouth had never been drier. He realized then that just one shoulder was warm. Jess was on the ground, too, asleep on his side. She had put on a sweater, the one previously tied on her waist. She wasn't shivering, but he couldn't stay here, and he wouldn't leave her there. He refused. Jess. She drew a sharp breath, sighed. It was a strange thought, perhaps spawned from exhaustion, but it seemed to Duke that a host of indescribable emotion fell past her lips on that sigh, poured onto the pavement and pooled around them. Jess, he tried again. I know, she said into his shoulder. She lifted her head off him. She turned and looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and he was startled to realize that while he slept, she'd cried for perhaps a long time. Duke hesitated. He wanted to ask, are you okay? But it felt like an idiot's question. So instead, he took hold of the aviators resting crooked on her forehead, pulled them off, detangling strands of raven hair bit by bit. He folded them and set them in her lap. Jess snorted and sniffed. I think I got snot on your jacket, she said. Duke asked, where do you think he is? And immediately regretted the warmness. Jess lifted one shoulder weakly and let it drop. Duke hadn't seen her do anything weakly in all the time he'd known her. She hoisted food platters above her head like they were paper towers. Duke finally was angry with Sam. We could drive up to Michigan ourselves and check Brighton. Jess shook her head. May as well just call them. She pinched a flake of gravel, flipped it so it clattered off the tire of Duke's car. Tomorrow. For a time, the lot was still. It was a stillness different from the heat and from the waiting. Here, the air was sharp under the lamplight, and they were each only waiting for the other to stand. You never give up on yourself, Jess said to his car. What? If you say what, Jess imitated his octave badly. One more time. I will load the jukebox with Madonna on Friday. Well, I don't. You figured it out. Rehab. You're sober. Duke was terrified all at once for reasons he did not understand. I didn't figure it out. But you're sober. Yeah, kind of. Kind of? He risked a split-second glance at her, registered her raised eyebrow, and looked away immediately. All right, not kind of, it's just that it never really ends, I guess. Jess drew a deep breath. Duke felt her shoulders rise, then fall as the breath punched back out of her. I don't want to give up on him, Duke muttered. You don't owe him that. He's my brother, and you're his sister. He's supposed to be there for you, too. He isn't here. Did you have anyone waiting for you, Jess asked. Did you change just for you? I guess I did. I don't really have much at all, Duke admitted. But you... He stopped himself, then realized all at once that already he had said too much. Me, Jess sounded amused. He watched her eyes wary. They were wide and reflective in the hard light. She seemed to want to hear him. He blurted, I admire you. She chuckled. You should. I make better margaritas. She wrung her hands in her sweater sleeves, looked down at her lap. Duke felt relieved and at his wits' end simultaneously. Then Jess said, you give me hope on your better days. I admire you too. Duke opened his mouth, closed it, befuddled. Jess kept talking. I just wondered, I thought maybe I could learn something from you, like you could help me figure it out. Maybe that's stupid and selfish. Duke opened his mouth, closed it. He felt like a stupid little goldfish all alone in his befuddling bowl. She wanted his advice. It was so cold out here in the artificial light under night dark. It was going to be a long, long drive home. Duke knew now, though. Something was obvious to him that was perhaps, he realized finally, not so obvious to her. You can't make him do anything, he said. He forced himself to hold her hurt gaze as he said it. You can wait forever. He's only going to come to you on his own. And maybe you'll be waiting so long that you'll wither where you stand, and he won't even know it because he isn't there. She blinked. She didn't recoil, didn't scoff at him. She just blinked that this never would have occurred to her. Duke felt something in him loosen all at once. He ran his tongue along the roof of his mouth and tasted nothing strange. He said easily, "Can we go home?" That's
There we go. That's better. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next writer, John Sarah. John was born and raised in Parma, Ohio. John loves horror and has watched Nightmare on Elm Street too many times to count. He says, "My whole life I've been obsessed with monsters, and the strange and supernatural always finds its way into my stories. I see my works as being about ordinary people who are able to overcome their horror by the story's end, even if they may not come out completely unscathed." John's advice for future BFAs would be find your voice. Only then can you commit yourself to your craft. You also have to learn to take a breather every once in a while too. It's okay to write something ugly. He says the best thing that's happened during his BFA experience was being able to be part of the Beachy Inklings, a creative writing club on campus where he could share his work with his friends. Tonight, he gets to share his work with us. John's stories have ugliness and horror. They also have characters you may like, ones you question, ones who may be monsters. None of these characteristics matter, though, if there's not a good story. And John writes good stories. He also writes good poems. Coincidentally, I got to read some today. Very, very awesome. Stories that make you want to know more. Stories that make you ask questions and give satisfying, horrific, and even unexpected answers. Stories that build suspense. Stories that bleed. Stories with victims and places that seem familiar but then become scenes of violent crimes. Stories with monsters. Stories with a strong voice. Stories that are fun. So sit back, enjoy the horror, and have some fun. Please help me welcome John Sarah.
Hi, I'm John Sarah. I'm going to be reading a story I wrote called Convenience. It's about a perfectly ordinary convenience store. Convenience. I realize I'm bleeding again, and a trickle of red drips from my thumb onto the counter. It lands with a splash against the cold metal surface, covered in dozens of smudged fingerprints from my impatient tapping. There's only 2 people left in the store now, a woman and her son. I can tell by her face she's exhausted. And when the boy opens his mouth to beg for a candy bar, I begin to understand why. As they make their way up to the register, I wipe off any remnants of blood onto my jeans, leaving a splotchy Rorschach test over my left pocket. It's the stupid boxes that did it, I think. The clean slice in my skin looks exactly like the damage their sharp edges can do. I'm a clerk, hardly what you'd call in shape, but somehow Richard, my boss, thinks I'm the perfect fit to carry the boxes that roll in on the trucks every morning. As a result, my normal shift of 9 to 5 starts an hour early, and in these long winter months, that means waking up to bitter cold. After the last box was unloaded this morning, Richard had approached me with a desperate look on his face, far removed from his usual calm and collected persona. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Heavy gray bags sagged beneath his eyes like dark crescent shadows. "Greg, I appreciate the work you do here. You know that. So what I'm about to request is not meant to screw you over or anything, but I need you to switch over the night shift, effective immediately. You know the staffing issues we've been having, right? Too many on day shift, too few on nights, but that's where you come in. I know you can handle the responsibility, Greg. In fact, I think you're going to have a lot of new responsibilities pretty soon. You'll have to if you want to climb the ladder like me. But I trust you'll get the job done. What do you say? In truth, there was only one answer to Richard's request, but even then, I needed the money far too badly to consider declining. I had moved to the small town of Mapleton a few short months ago. Work in the store had given me enough money to scrape by most days, but that wasn't saying much. Hi, welcome to Richard's Convenience. Did you find everything you were looking for today? I asked the woman in a jovial-sounding voice. The woman returns my hello in a barely audible tone, still keeping both eyes glued on her son. Not wavering, he tugs at her coat, relentlessly begging for that candy bar. It's company policy to greet every customer like that, as per Richard's request. Personally, I think he just enjoys hearing his name spoken aloud. It's a reminder he owns all of this, all of us. Most of the money in the town flowed directly from Richard's family, the Dubois, and it's just one Richard in a long line of other Richards, grandfather to father to son. It was a name stamped everywhere in Mapleton. As far as I knew, the convenience store was the first to be run by this particular Richard. He was proud of that fact, fashioning himself the only celebrity in Mapleton. Richard came in from time to time to check things out, and an air of odd charisma followed. There was mere presence, from the constant tacky suits to his slick-back blonde hair with frosted tips, exuded sliminess in a way only certain bosses could. During our first job interview, Richard said he knew he was going to like me. He didn't specify why, but his words stuck with me. Not in a boosted confidence sort of way, but something else. Like I was going to have to keep working my ass off trying to impress this guy, all in the hopes he'd throw more responsibilities my way. You can't be that hungry. You just ate, the woman snapped at her son, placing her items on the conveyor belt. Since I started working here, I've come to realize you can tell a lot about people from what's in their shopping cart. With the woman, it's not hard to see she's on a budget. Every food item I pick up is either off-brand or discounted enough to be affordable. Or maybe the store attracts the same kind of people. Most who shop here are poor, coming here for the very reason our name suggests, convenience. As the woman swipes her credit card, the boy turns his attention from the candy to the small television set next to me. It's entertainment while you work, as Richard put it. On the screen, a reporter details a recent car crash not far from here. It's a nasty one too, judging by the state of the cars. A series of photos pop up to display the aftermath. Every window is completely busted, leaving glass covering the road. The car, a shiny red Corolla, is mangled beyond recognition. The screen changes to show a pair of bodies being hauled into an ambulance in white body bags. Though the screen is small, it's not a pretty sight. Josh, don't look at that, the woman orders her son before glaring at me. Will you turn that off, please? She asks. Her voice comes out with a hint of frustration, as if she's expecting me to shield her child from the dangers of television. I feel relieved to be barricaded behind the register. Then again, maybe I should be paying attention. I didn't realize how invested I too had become in the report. Oh, right, sorry, I answer. I forget the remote is nowhere in sight, and after some awkward fumbling, I decide to just unplug the thing, reducing the screen to pitch black in an instant. It's hard to tell if this makes the woman happy, but she's rung up minutes later, and I bid her and her son good night. Outside, I watch as the car pulls into the lot, headlights glaring through droplets of falling snow. There's Trey, I think to myself, right on schedule. He steps out of the car, a cigarette sticking out of one side of his mouth and billowing thin gray smoke into the air. Trey works the night shift and also happens to be my apartment neighbor. He's the one who told me about the job. As I step out of the store, a harsh blast of icy wind slaps my face, and as I recoil in pain, Trey laughs at my suffering. He's a good friend. Hey Trey, you hear the news? Yep, Richard texted me earlier. Good to know I won't be the only one stuck dealing with weirdos all night, Trey replies, flicking his cigarette onto the snow. What kind of weirdos? I ask. I think it's a legitimate question. All kinds, he chuckles. Sounds ominous, I say. Really, this is the part I'm afraid of. Well, I can deal with all types during the day. I'm sure it only gets worse after dark. You know it. I'm going to have to teach you the rules of the night shift, Craig, Trey taunts with another laugh. There are rules? I ask. Of course. There are rules to everything, Craig. You just have to know them, Trey says, disappearing through the front door. The drive home feels darker than usual, the stretch of road black and endless. I find myself thinking about the car wreck again. It's not the only accident to happen in Mapleton lately. A month ago, I remember hearing about a wreck that left the driver missing an entire chunk of his body. I almost gagged listening to the reporter describe it. What if it was me? I shuddered, imagining the ice swerving me off the road into the woods, where I crashed into a tree and freeze to death. How long would it take before someone found my cold, lifeless body? Maybe they never would. I discard the thought and come to a sudden stop. A familiar black convertible is parked at the side of the road. It's Richard's, without a doubt. That car is practically his baby. Everyone knows it means trouble when you see it in the lot, because usually it means he's coming to scope things out, which is just a nicer way of saying getting in your business. I glance at the car. The side door on the driver's side is wide open, with no sign of Richard anywhere. My brain races with thoughts as to why his car would be out here in the middle of nowhere. Frightening possibilities come to mind. I sigh, curiosity getting the best of me, and step out of my vehicle to inspect the lone car. The wind is as harsh here as it was in the parking lot, biting at the back of my neck. It's an eerie feeling, both the silence and the stillness. There's no animals or people out here. Every recognizable bit of life is dead from winter, covered in pale snow. Nothing but the howl of the wind can be heard. It sounds like a faint scream. When I reach Richard's car, I shake my cell phone's flashlight awake and turn it to the driver's seat. The inside is in good condition, fine leather, of course, and smelling of Richard's expensive brand cologne. I start to question just what I'm doing snooping around like this, but as I reach my hands into the darkness of Richard's car, I feel something sharp in the palm of my hand, like a loose screw or bolt. Turning my light towards it, I see what I've picked up and reel back in a combination of disgust and horror. It's not a screw after all. I'm holding a long, yellowed fingernail with a few wispy strands of hair clinging to the broken edge. I let out a cry and a string of curses before a noise from the woods interrupts my thoughts. It sounds like the crunching of branches, like an animal passing by. It must be something big too, judging by how loud the twigs snap beneath the creature's weight. I freeze next to Richard's car. I'm not alone anymore. Something's out there in those woods and I can't move a muscle. An eerie whimper follows the brittle crunching, sounding like an injured dog. The whimper becomes a long, drawn-out howl, and the icy wind joins behind it, creating a chorus of ghostly wails that send me running back to my car. The thing lets out another ear-piercing howl, so close in my ears I feel like it's right behind me. I jump as a shadow darts past me between the mangled, snow-covered elm trees, too fast to tell what it is. Then the whole road grows dark again. My heart is still beating when I climb back into my car, feeling like I've witnessed something I was never supposed to. Even after searching his car, the mystery remains as to Richard's whereabouts. Was he eaten by that thing in the woods? The idea is so absurd it makes me laugh. Returning home, I struggle to fall asleep, waking up at the slightest noise. The shadows around me turn into monsters. Panic races through me, fearing that the creature from the woods may have followed me home. It's 6 a.m. when I hear my phone buzz. An Amber Alert blares on the screen. A child has gone missing in the area, a boy of 7 years old with blonde hair and green eyes. I gasp as I read the address he was last seen. It's not far at all from where I found Richard's car. Suddenly I'm cold all over again, like the wind is creeping through the windows into my bones. I feel that same chill as I return to Richard's the next night, finding his car parked in the lot. Richard himself stands beside it, looking as if he's been waiting here for me. The red glow of the neon sign overhead paints the entire storefront crimson, leaving my boss resembling a devilish-looking shadow against it. At this hour, Richard should be long gone. I step out of the car, greeted once more by the wind's desperate cries. Richard flashes me a smile full of white teeth. "There you are, Craig," Richard beams. "I'm glad you could make it. I was getting desperate, man. I'm just sorry I had to do this on such short notice." "Make it?" I questioned Richard's wording. This wasn't a party, it was my job. I literally had to be here. "Of course. Is everything okay?" I asked. "I'm not used to seeing you here so late." "Huh? Oh yeah, all good, man. No rest for the wicked, as they say," Richard smiles, before he looks like he's about to try heave on the concrete. "Look, I'll be back in soon, all right? I have some errands I need to take care of first. You can grab a bag of chips if you want. I don't think anyone will notice." Richard laughs at the suggestion, but it sounds forced. I walk into the store, where Trey is busy arguing with a customer over an expired coupon. I take my seat at the register, my back pressed against the colorful display of cigarettes. It gives me a good view of the store. At times, it looks like a maze, full of winding paths stocked with junk food. The aisles themselves are brightly lit alleyways, reflecting the white ceiling lights. The tile floor is so shiny you can see your distorted reflection. At the very back lies frozen foods, made evident by the glowing blue sign which read only the word cold. Looking around, there's at least a dozen customers shopping in various parts of the store, far more than I expected. "Hey, you hear about the missing kid?" Trey asks, startling me as he hops over the barricade to sit beside me. "What? The alert?" "Yeah, I got it last night. I couldn't sleep." "Kidnapping?" I ask. "That's probably because you don't work hard enough. Too much leftover energy. And now, didn't you hear? The dad's missing too. It said so on the news." "Well, doesn't that make sense? If he abducted his kid, he wouldn't want to be found," I say. "I always heard most abductions were by people the victim knew." "Well, yeah, but it's not like that. They found his car on the side of the road, popped tires, dents all over the hood, but no sign of either of them, and no way were they walking in this cold. What exactly are you implying, Trey? I'm saying they were probably snatched. If you ask me, it's just another reason to carry a gun around here, Trey says. I roll my eyes. Everyone who knows Trey knows he owns a gun, just by how much he brags about it. He claims it's for protection. Protection from what? I don't know. I think I'll be all right, I reply. Truthfully, while the store could get some odd customers, I never felt like I was in any danger around them. You never know. Just watch. One day you'll be in trouble, and it'll be up to me to save your ass. Maybe you'll think differently then. Like I said, there are rules to everything, Craig. I don't think you know them all yet. Yeah, well, you still haven't told me what those rules are, I say. I just did. Rule 1, get a gun. You're gonna need it, especially on the night shift. Oh my God, Trey, please tell me you didn't bring a gun to work. He smirks at me. What do you think? There are monsters in Mapleton, Craig. You should take whatever protection you can get. The tension in the air is broken by shattering glass. An old man has broken a carton of milk near the dairy section. Normally I'd groan in annoyance, but tonight I appreciate the diversion. I leave Trey alone at the register, mopping up the mess left all over the floor. Outside, the snow falls steadily. A reporter on the radio had said a storm was on the way, and I just know I'll have to drive home in the worst of it. I start mindlessly mopping all over the store, still thinking about the night before, about Richard's car and the broken fingernail. There are monsters in Mapleton, Trey had said, and his words echo in my head. I stop as I reach the entrance to the men's restroom. What sounds like a whimper echoes from inside, faint but drawn out. It sounds just like the noise I heard last night. I tell myself that's impossible, not unless someone brought their dog into the store. I hear the noise a second time, far more animalistic than the first, and heavy with distortion. I drop my arm and push open the door, greeted by the familiar buzz of overhead lights. They cast a white reflection onto the tile walls, though most of the bathroom is dim. I listen for the sound, gazing toward the stalls. Each of them are open except for one on the end. I panic as the latch unlocks. It's too late to run. The door swings open, and I find myself face to face with Richard again. He looks as startled as I am. Craig, are you doing all right? I don't want you running off on me, Richard chuckles nervously, wiping sweat from his forehead. His face is a ghostly shade of white. I can understand not liking working at night, you know. I've never cared for the dark myself. I try to laugh. He doesn't know how much I actually do want to run away. You're scared of the dark? I don't know if I believe that, I tease. Not afraid exactly, just nervous. Anyway, did you need something? Richard asked. No, I don't think so. Well, actually, did you happen to hear any weird noises around here? I asked. Weird? Weird how? Richard eyes me curiously. I don't know how to describe it. It was like a cry, like a dog or something. Richard smiles a half smirk. Do you really think I'd let a dog in my store? Those things carry diseases. Well, of course not. I was probably just imagining things, that's all, I reply. I figure this is what Richard wants to hear. He puts a hand on my shoulder. I wouldn't say that. You know, sometimes you have to trust what's around you is real, as crazy as it may seem, the things we see, or in your case, hear. You can do that, right, Craig? Richard asks, his eyes studying me intently. I blink. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. For someone like Richard, it probably sounds profound. I nod. This seems to satisfy him, and I watch as something in his eyes changes. The green dulls. It's like he's looking at me, but his mind has wandered elsewhere, somewhere distant. He forces the smile back on his face, but it doesn't stay long. Good, because that's exactly what I'm going to need you to do right now, Richard says. His voice comes out in a choked whisper. What? I ask, my body growing cold. The small bathroom walls feel like they're closing in around me. I watch as Richard backs up against one of the stall doors, slumping over in a drunken manner. Sweat continues to drip down his face, and he removes his suit jacket to escape whatever heat is plaguing him. Little by little, he unbuttons the shirt beneath, exposing bits of bare chest covered in dark hair. You know, I thought after my first time it wouldn't hurt as much, but if anything, it's gotten worse, Richard laughs, just before his demented giggles turn into gasps of pain. God, I hate the moon. I hate the goddamn moon. He speaks loudly through clenched teeth. What are you talking about? I ask. I want to help Richard, but my brain screams at me to run. Richard, what's wrong? Richard looks up at me from the floor. His eyes are no longer green, but an intense shade of red. His face, already thin, grows more gaunt by the second. His body, too, like I'm watching him starve to death in real time. I can't control myself sometimes, Craig, he chokes weakly. I guess I wasn't cut out for the family business after all, Richard laughs, just before he opens his mouth to scream in agony. I listen as his bones pop one at a time. It's as if his body is being torn apart from the inside. From his flesh sprouts dark hair, covering him like a sweeping shadow. With his face obscured completely by hair, it's hard to tell this thing in front of me is Richard. I stand in silence, watching as his face contorts even further beyond recognition, his mouth and nose extending into the long snout of a monstrous wolf. There are monsters in Mapleton. I'm dreaming, I tell myself. I have to be dreaming. This kind of thing doesn't happen in real life. It can't. But the foul smell of animal hair confirms this is no dream. Richard's hands are the next to change, elongating just like his razor-sharp fingernails, tinted a sickly yellow like the piece I found in his car. That now feels like a lifetime ago. Finally, the creature lets out an ear-piercing howl that shakes the very foundation of the bathroom. I take my chance to run, but the beast tackles me with incredible speed into the mirror. Chunks of broken glass scrape my flesh, and I let out a scream I'm sure the entire store could hear. My fresh wounds only entice the monster. He stands over me, taking in the scent. Hot breath pours from his jaws, reeking of death. Richard, I choke, trying to somehow appeal to his humanity, but the hulking beast has little left. A series of animalistic noises leaves his mouth, and I seize the opportunity to push him off with what feels like miraculous strength. I run back into the store, where an old man is placing cereal into his cart. Run! I shout with as much energy as I have left, the pain of everything that has just transpired screaming through my body. I know I can't run for long. I'm already weak. But I have to save these people, I tell myself. They don't deserve to become food for this thing. My cries cause the old man to jump, and he looks up in confusion. Soon he sees the reason for my screams as Richard comes barreling down the aisle, knocking boxes of cereal to the ground. The man's expression changes to wide-eyed terror. Richard leaps on top of him, his howls drowning out my pleas for him to stop. Richard sinks his teeth deep into the man's neck, tearing out a chunk of flesh. Blood gushes from the open wound as the man falls to the ground, and the beast wastes no time devouring the rest of him. As I look at the mutilated body, now missing large chunks, the pieces come together. You, the attacks, the car crashes, the bodies. It's all been you, hasn't it, Richard? You killed and ate all those people, I shout. The creature doesn't respond. It doesn't need to. The look in its red eyes tells me all I need to know. So I run like hell down the aisles as Richard continues his pursuit. He's faster than any human. Reaching for whatever I can find on the shelves, I hurl cans and boxes. All it achieves is making him angrier. Everyone run, I scream at the top of my lungs. Get out of the store now. To my left, Richard tears another customer's body in half, exposing pink entrails. Their face, what's left of it, has been eaten off. Somehow, this isn't enough to satisfy him, and Richard scans the room for his next meal. Amidst the panic, customers dart in circles around the aisles as Richard takes out even more victims. Through hazy vision, I watch as Trey rushes over to me. He looks as if he's been waiting for this moment his entire life. Trey's determination is quickly silenced by another distorted howl. In horror, I watch as the beast lunges out from behind him, knocking Trey to the ground as he takes a large bite out of his shoulder. Trey, no! I scream my friend's name as I listen to the horrible sound of Richard's chewing. A combination of grief and rage fills my body, and I find myself working on autopilot. There's no time to mourn now. Everyone follow me, I shout to the remaining customers, leading them out into the snow. The storm the reporter had mentioned has arrived, raging with the fierce howl of the wind. The full moon glows overhead, mocking me. I know I have to go back inside. Richard is nowhere to be found as I pry open the doors, sealing myself inside. Panicked, I search the store, expecting the creature to jump out at any minute. Richard, come on out, I shout down the aisles, which now feel like my own personal labyrinth. I stagger to where I was cleaning earlier and arm myself with the mop I left behind, breaking it in two. It was certainly no gun, but Trey had said you should take whatever protection you can get. Wielding my mop, I limp to the frozen food section. I stare at my reflection against cartons of ice cream. My skin is so pale now, white from blood loss. I freeze as a beastly form appears behind me. Richard's canine face sneers over my shoulder, his jaws a crimson smile. I can't fight you anymore, okay? I tell him, my voice weak. I grip the mop with both hands. I only have enough energy to drive this thing right through you. The creature growls in amusement, as if taunting me to try. He lunges, and as a hairy paw tears through my skin, scratching deep into my flesh, I plunge the sharp end of the mop into Richard's shoulder. I watch in satisfaction as he bleeds for the first time. The creature lets out a whimper, and as I pull the weapon out, his face contorts again. It's as if his body is turning inside out. His monstrous form, with all his hair, retreats back inside his body. The snout pulls itself apart, tearing open like a rubber mask. Beneath the monster, Richard looks rugged and dangerous, like an animal fresh off the hunt. Oh God, did it work? I think it worked, Richard cries. His voice is full of exasperation. He runs his hands across his face, feeling the now absent hair. What the hell happened to you? I asked, trying not to show my surprise that I actually heard him. I don't know, but the voice is gone. It's finally gone, Richard rejoices. Richard, I don't know what voice you're talking about or even how you're human again, but you just killed a lot of people, and I'm guessing you've killed a lot more before this too. For God's sake, you killed a child, Richard. That boy and his father who went missing. I know that had to have been you. I know, he whispers. You don't understand. Hell, I don't know if I understand it myself, but I have to feed Craig. Once that moon is full, I need to obey. It's like there's this voice in my head telling me to consume. Those were innocent people, Richard. I know. I guess I've never really felt human myself. It makes this easier, Richard explains. Consider it a family tradition. The Dubois have passed on this curse through the generations. My old man gave it to me and his old man before him. Everyone thinks it's a bite that does it, but no, that's too risky. You want to turn someone, not kill them. All it really takes is a teeny little scratch, kind of like the one I just gave you. My mind goes blank at Richard's words, and I look down at my shirt. Torn scraps of cloth reveal a new scar on my chest, burning red hot in agitation. I want to vomit, to scream. No way, you're lying, I shout, feeling my body shut down as I fall to the floor. I'm sorry, Craig, but you're going to change from now on, just like me. That curse will burrow its way into your head like a virus. Richard crouches down next to me. You just need to obey it. No, I'm not a monster, not like you. I never hurt anyone. Richard looks hurt at my comment. You get used to it after a while. Most of the time you can just shut it out. My head spins. Oh God, I'm gonna die, aren't I? You're not gonna die, Craig, but it is going to hurt like hell, especially your first time, Richard says, patting my shoulder. Why did you do this to me? I asked. Hot tears dripped down my face. Why me? I don't know, because you were convenient, I guess. See, I wasn't lying when I said you'd have some new responsibilities to take on. All this time I've been looking for someone to take my place. And so what? I choked. You get to live a happy life while I'm a monster? Something like that, yeah? But don't worry, I'm here to guide you through it all. I'm always happy to train new employees. I shut my eyes before the silence in the room is interrupted by loud gunshots. Through blurred vision, I watch as Trey staggers in, gun in hand. He's barely holding himself together, clutching the gaping wound in his shoulder. He fires a single round through Richard's skull. Bits of blood and brain matter splatter onto the walls. The final look on Richard's face is one of shock, a kind of surprise that tells me that despite all of his planning, he didn't see this coming. His limp body falls to the ground in a puddle of crimson, a powerful man reduced to a corpse. Oh God, Trey chokes. I didn't know if I was going to make it, but I heard you screaming. I told you I'd save you one day, right? I just never imagined it'd be like this. I thought you were dead, man, I cried. Trey, please, don't let me turn into a monster, I begged. You won't. You're going to be okay, all right? We're both going to be okay. Trey's words come out in hoarse whispers as he slumps to the ground beside me, both of us bleeding out onto the tile floor. Outside, the snow continues to fall, the storm growing hungrier by the minute. It howls a final dying cry, and I lick my lips to taste the wind. Thank you.
All right, star number 3 in our 4-star extravaganza. We're at the midpoint, so maybe shake your wiggles out for a hot second. Right, get it all. There we go. All right, it is again my pleasure to introduce writer Liz Barnett. Liz grew up in Rising Sun, Ohio, and their hobbies include making art, crocheting, collecting dolls, cosplaying, and sitting at home with their cats, Dandy and Quinn. Liz is the historian of BGSU's chapter of Sigma Tau Delta and has loved getting to work with this organization. Liz's advice for future BFA students is to never be afraid to reach out to your professors and form bonds with your peers. It makes more of a difference than you think. When asked about the best thing that happened during the BFA experience, Liz said, "It is honestly just the quiet moments on campus, eating with my best friends and laughing about assignments, classes, things professors have said. Just getting to be with my friends has been a joy and I love every second of it." When it comes to writing, Liz says, I love to explore people's interests and relationships and emotions and just write about what makes them who they are. I think people are really interesting. Liz's writing crafts their interests about people with careful intention. There's intention to represent LGBTQ plus characters, intention to expand reality with magic and witches, intention to place people in situations that reveal their true character. And regardless of the story or setting or version of reality, Liz's writing is filled with a desire to uncover truth. And while the intended truth is always there, a carefully laid foundation, like all good writing, there is also truth in what readers choose to see, what we take away. So tonight, let Liz take you away to one of their worlds and help you question and maybe even decide what to believe. Help me welcome Liz Barnett.
Can you hear me? All right. So I'm reading a story and a poem for you tonight. So I'll start with the story. This is Cortado. Does he even know what a cortado is? Hilda's voice dripped with disgust as she looked in Morgan's direction. He didn't respond as he worked to set up the espresso machine. Hilda could get mad all she wanted about him not responding. He had bigger fish to fry. Across the counter of the coffee shop, waiting for his cortado, was a boy Morgan had hoped to never see again after that night. Oliver's eyes bored holes into the side of Morgan's face, and currently, he was trying to convince himself that if he just avoided looking in Oliver's direction long enough, Oliver would disappear. He wasn't a bad guy. Morgan had seen him a few times on campus. He always seemed to have friends around him. The guy didn't need to be hanging out at Morgan's job waiting to talk to him of all people. They didn't have any classes in common, and they ran in completely different social circles. If Morgan hadn't known better, he'd say, "Oh, Morgan dear, the espresso seems to be done." Jules, Morgan's boss, spoke from over his shoulder. Morgan's eyes focused back on the task at hand. Right, Cortado. Sorry, Morgan muttered the apology as he moved the cup over to the side. Hilda took the opportunity to slide in and start working on a few of the other coffee orders, while Morgan had been absorbed with this one. It wasn't that a cortado was hard to make. Hilda's question about whether or not Oliver knew what it even was made the easily annoyed part of Morgan in his stomach flare up. All it took to make a cortado was equal parts espresso and milk. It was just one of those things that sounded fancier than it actually was. Jules waved a hand in his direction to dismiss the apology. No worries. If you need a break, let me know. They patted his shoulder and returned back to the register they'd been manning for the past hour. The shop was a little low on help at the moment, so Jules was out of the back office helping around the place until they could get another part-timer. Though Morgan admitted to himself it was pretty hard to get a job here if you didn't already know Jules. Morgan only ended up with the job here since Jules was his guardian after his mother's disappearance when he was 10. Now at 22, he no longer lived with them, but it was still nice of them to check up on him during work. Morgan poured 4 ounces of milk into the waiting metal cup and began to froth the milk. There it was again, the feeling of eyes trying to burn a hole through his head. By the time Morgan had poured 2 ounces into the cup and began to walk over to give Oliver his order, he was sure he would have gotten embarrassed and looked away from the barista. Instead, he found himself looking into eyes that reminded him of the plants Jules grew around the patio outside. They stood, frozen in place for what seemed like 20 minutes, though it couldn't have been that long. You need me to shout your name? Morgan finally broke the silence and helped drink out to him. Oliver's lashes fluttered, as if he really hadn't broken his gaze the whole time Morgan had been there. Oh, hey, this mine? Oliver's voice was deeper than Morgan pictured. Instead of answering, Morgan lifted the cup to stare at the name written on the side. When he did speak, his tone came out clipped. Maybe, he said it on the counter. Your name Oliver, or just guy who likes to stare at people while they work? Internally, Morgan winced at his own question. Jules typically let them get away with a lot, otherwise Hilda would have gone stir crazy. Still, something the customer was a bit much. Oliver seemed to take it in stride. He smiled at Morgan as if he hadn't even realized Morgan's tone was slightly insulting. Sorry about that, just thought you looked familiar. Oliver sipped his drink, eyebrows furrowing just a bit as he pulled back. Bitter. His words were followed by a soft cough. This time, it was Morgan's turn to stare him down. Slowly, he spoke. You do know a cortado is just espresso and milk, right? He had to know. There was no way he would have ordered it otherwise. At least, Morgan tried to convince himself of that fact. However, Oliver laughed awkwardly as he admitted, "No, I just Thought it sounded cool. Do you got any sugar? Morgan pointed towards the station the shop had set up with various sweetener packets, carefully arranged in their little containers. Oliver gave a quick nod. Oh, thanks. He hesitated, still holding his drink. For a second, Morgan wondered if Oliver was going to ask him to remake it or make him something else entirely. It wouldn't be the first time, but he seriously did not want to deal with it today. If he had to endure another round of staring, he was going to ask Jules if he could go sit in the back with Molly while she was working on the next batch of cookies for the display case. It wasn't that. Instead, Oliver spoke. I was wondering if I could actually talk to you about something. As if he hadn't processed how fucking weird that was until he actually said it, his eyes widened a bit as he tried his best to clarify. It's nothing weird. He must have realized that made it sound even weirder, as now he began to trip over his own words in a desperate attempt to salvage this conversation. I just wanted to see what time to get off work. I mean, like, he must have short-circuited as he ended up just stammering for a minute before looking towards the sugar station. I'm just gonna go. Morgan raised an eyebrow as the other boy shuffled his feet over to the drink station. That sadly hadn't been Morgan's most awkward exchange with a customer, but it was up there. Even Hilda gave him a pitying look as he moved back into the swing of preparing orders. When the shop settled down, Morgan found himself looking for Oliver's head of dark curls, but he must have left sometime during the rush. Looking for someone in particular, Morgan tried not to jump anymore when Jules spoke. After all, they weren't intentionally trying to scare the shit out of everyone around them. However, he couldn't help the slight flinch at the sudden sound of their voice in his ear. He turned to meet their charcoal eyes, hesitating only a moment before turning back to the counter he'd been using as an excuse to look for the other boy. No, just looking around. Morgan lied, expertly, in his opinion. Jules tried to be subtle, but Morgan was sure they were stifling a laugh behind his back. Really? They asked, leaning against the spot Morgan had just wiped. Because to me, it looks like you're cleaning where Hilda just cleaned, they added, nodding their head towards Hilda, who was in the process of cleaning all of the counter space. Morgan paused his wiping and sighed, leaning back against the counter as well. Sorry, he apologized quickly, but Jules laughed. What for? They moved from their spot against the counter. Don't think my employee making sure the store is clean is a real reason to apologize. Your mother would love to hear about this. The mention of Morgan's mom had him pausing just long enough to flash back to the way she and Jules used to tease him for how messy he was when he first started making coffee. It was amazing the way it only made his chest ache for a moment before he was focusing back on the conversation. Morgan searched for the words. Getting distracted? He concluded. He plopped the cloth he'd been using back into the cleaning bucket nearby and grimaced when he noticed the time the cleaning solution was last replaced. He'd probably need to do that as soon as Jules said whatever it was they were really thinking. Jules set the drink they'd been casually sipping back in its spot in the back corner. There's no customers, you're fine. Besides, I saw that boy earlier. Morgan grimaced as they continued in a sing-song voice. He was cute. Is he from school? You sound like my grandmother, Morgan spoke under his breath. They laughed. Maybe I am. As your grandmother, I'd like to know who my sweet baby boy is seeing. As if to further the joke, they reached out to pinch his cheek. Morgan swatted their hand away gently. I'm pretty sure you're not that old. Despite saying that, Morgan wasn't actually sure how old Jules was. They were definitely old enough that Morgan remembered seeing them as a child around the house with his mother. But to Morgan, their appearance hadn't changed in the years since. Their tawny beige skin didn't have a wrinkle in sight, and their onyx hair tied back in a basic braid didn't have a single gray strand mixed into it. As well, the way his mother spoke to Jules had always been as if they existed long before she'd met them. Who can say? Jules coyly smiled. Now, can I know why you were looking for that boy? Their tone was gentle. If they really wanted to know, Morgan was sure they could force it out of him. Instead, they wanted to ask him. He owed them at least a slight explanation. I kind of messed up. Jules didn't ask Morgan to elaborate, but he did anyways. The other night, he paused. 2 nights ago, when I was heading home from work, I saw him get cornered by Morgan's eyes flicked around the shop, making sure no one was around to hear him. There were still 1 or 2 customers around the shop, so he spoke carefully. Dog, 2 places down from here. The greenhouse with the witch hazel outside. Jules nodded, eyes continuing to focus on Morgan, silently urging him to continue his story. It cornered him, and Molly let me take home some leftovers, and I managed to distract it and help him up. I thought it was dark enough he wouldn't have seen my face, but he must have figured out who I was. Jules made a soft noise, tilting their head. Doesn't sound like you messed up. Unless there's more. Morgan was sure if he were in a cartoon there'd be a little sweat drop near his head.
Jules knew how to read him like he was an open book. He hoped it was only Jules who could do that because his music composition teacher started knowing when he totally bullshit one of her assignments, he was screwed. I may have used other means to get the dog to leave. I just gave it a little push. Morgan let out a groan as he buried his face in his hands. Now he wants to talk to me. I seriously thought he wouldn't know who I was. We didn't keep a creature like that around here. Morgan thought that even if the whole neighborhood was the way it was, keeping something like that seemed like a mistake. Hilda, who must have been listening in the whole time, suddenly turned to look at Morgan with a trace of disbelief. You didn't. Her voice betrayed the smile she had on her face. Great. Morgan was sure that Hilda was living for the opportunity to tease the hell out of him for screwing up. Jules shushed her with a look that must have been pretty effective. She backed off a little. However, she still whispered, I can't believe you did something in front of him. Did he hear it too? If he saw thank God for the lilac-haired regular who approached the register for a refill. Otherwise, Morgan was sure he'd begin to melt into the floor under her judgmental gaze. However, that did mean he was alone to face Jules. Instead of the disappointment he was expecting, they seemed pretty calm. You should talk to him. They lifted their drink once again to take a sip, pausing to meet Morgan's eyes. Maybe he just wants to thank you. They placed a hand on Morgan's shoulder as they continued. And if you're truly worried, I can take care of it. With that, they set their drink down again and walked through the doorway towards the kitchen, probably to give Molly her 15-minute break, but Morgan was sure it was also to plan for the worst. Morgan didn't have much time to dwell on possibly disappointing them before orders started flooding in again. He checked the clock and deflated a little. It was time for the afternoon rush. The rest of the day passed by in a blur, compared to the morning. Hilda had taken a few chances to get some jabs in at him, but never anything too deep before she left. Molly hadn't said much to him, but he was sure that was just because he hadn't been in the back much today and not because of anything he'd done. Jules didn't come back onto the floor except to grab a drink after helping out with the rush. Morgan wasn't sure if that should worry him or if he was grateful. He finished wiping down the last table and headed to the back to grab his jacket off its hook near the office. Heading out, he yelled back through the kitchen towards the office even further back where the light was still on. Jules must be down here and not in their apartment above the shop. Even if there was no reply to confirm. The shop was 2 stories with the main cafe area and a staircase outside that led up to the apartment Morgan used to also inhabit with Jules. Morgan yanked up the zipper on his jacket as he walked out the door, clinging to the warm black tea with a splash of honey which he'd made himself right before he left. His apartment wasn't far from the cafe, but the October night air still managed to sink into his bones. He popped one headphone in and started walking towards his place. Soft acoustic played in his ears, soothing any leftover nerves from today. Jules was right. There really wasn't anything to worry about. Oliver was a nice guy, even if staring at Morgan at work had been kind of a weird move. If Oliver had seen anything, Morgan was sure he wouldn't do anything to hurt Morgan. Maybe he could just talk to him and make sure he didn't have any bad intentions. Oh, Morgan, wake up! The voice coming from behind Morgan had him freezing in place. He turned on the ball of his foot to look at the source. Sure enough, there was Oliver in a big gray hoodie, jogging his way over. Morgan changed his mind. This guy was fucking weird and was gonna kill him. He started walking away, slowly at first, but as Oliver got closer, he began to run towards his apartment. Wait, Oliver's voice rang out from behind him. Like hell, Morgan was waiting. He pushed himself faster and tried to look for ways to lose the boy following him. He turned a few corners and thought he was doing well, until a hand touched his arm. Morgan let out an undignified yell as he whipped around, his hands perched in the air like they were above the keys on his piano at home. He couldn't think of any sounds in particular, so he slammed them down the way he would strike a harsh chord. As he did, a wave of air slammed into Oliver and pushed him back onto his ass on the sidewalk. They both looked at one another with shock as Morgan realized he'd really done it now. If Oliver had any doubts before, there was no way he did now. I was right, Oliver spoke, his brown cheeks taking on a slight red undertone as he looked up at Morgan from where he sat on the cold concrete sidewalk. Morgan waited for it, the disgust, the fear, the shock, anything at all. Instead, it was quiet, in a way that seemed to match when Morgan was handing him his drink earlier. The silence was finally broken by Oliver pushing himself up onto his feet. He brushed any dirt off of his jeans and looked towards Morgan again. Morgan should be running. This guy had just been chasing him. Despite that, he was there, frozen. Oliver was the one to break the silence, grinning so wide Morgan was afraid he was going to hurt himself. That was awesome. Morgan was sure he was already looking at Oliver with shock, but it must not have hit the other boy as he continued. I thought I saw you doing some sort of magic the other night, but I thought I imagined it. That's so cool. Have you always been able to do stuff like that? Did you learn it? Where'd you learn it from? His questions continued coming as Morgan finally began to compose himself. Finally, Morgan crossed his arms over his chest and held up one hand to shush him. When Oliver was silent, Morgan spoke. Well, now you know. What do you want from me? He was sure he was going to ask Morgan to do something he couldn't, like bring someone back to life or get him better grades. If he was able to do either of those things, he'd have an A in music theory, and, well, instead of asking for either of those things, Oliver surprised Morgan by putting his hands together and giving him eyes full of pleading. Teach me? My favorite comment I've ever gotten about that piece is in a workshop where somebody asked me, what does Morgan look like? And I was about to describe him, his hair, his eyes, and the fact that he wears a big sweater. And then someone looked at me and said, Morgan seems like a sweater guy. And I think that is my favorite comment I've ever heard about that story. So I hope you picture a sweater guy when you think of Morgan. And this is my last piece. It's a poem, fairly new. It's called I Don't Know Yet. When I die, it'll be quiet. I think. Who knows? Is it normal to have a preference? I want to drown. Quiet, calm water for miles and miles, fish picking at the bloated flesh. I'd like that. People worry a lot about leaving behind a legacy, a trace of them once they're gone. Make a mark on the world, they say. I know, however, my impact will be small. The world won't know my name. Once someone forgets, that's it. I'm gone, and that's okay. So I'll laugh with my friends, sit on beat-up couches with dumb grins. I'll kiss my partner and send messages back and forth till we're together again. I'll drink my coffee in shops or at home, curled up with my laptop, and I'll lie still while my cats sleep, purring in my lap or on my chest. Thank you. One more reader. Our final writer tonight is Trinity Craycraft. Trinity is from Henrietta Township, which is close to Oberlin, Ohio. She loves reading, writing, and playing video games. She has a pet rabbit, Houdini, which I did not know. We're going to talk about that later, and two cats, Morris and Brooklyn. When asked about the best thing in her BFA experience, she said, I made a lot of friends. I'm not quite as reserved as I was in my first semester at BG, and I've met a lot of people that I don't know if I would have met if I didn't try new things. So it's no surprise that our advice to future BFAs is to make connections, make friends that will last you a lifetime. Throughout Trinity's fiction, the importance of making connections is clear. There are connections of different genres. One of her stories combines sci-fi and horror suspense with an AI implant that leads detectives to a deserted house and a mysterious figure in the woods. There are connections between forms and between reader and writer. In the story you'll hear tonight, you'll have to choose your own adventure. You get to decide what path to take and trust that Trinity will lead you to a satisfying ending or endings. It's all by design. Trinity's stories create an experience for the reader, each one trying to capture what she herself loves about fiction, being transported to different places, and thinking about all the possible scenarios and decisions that characters have to make to live and survive in their worlds. So tonight we get to decide where to go, who to talk to, maybe even how we want the story to end. And in doing so, we get to help Trinity bring her story to life. Please help me welcome Trinity Craycraft. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Better? Cool. Awesome. So as was mentioned before, this is a choose your own adventure story. So I'm going to give you guys some options and you'll just raise hands and I'll take majority. That's what we'll do. You are a hunter in 1972, searching for proof of beings known as cryptids, strange and unnatural creatures you believe exist somewhere in the wild. Unfortunately, society prefers to have actual proof of such beings and believes them to be purely fiction due to a lack of evidence. But you know somewhere out there they exist, and you will go down in history as the first person to provide physical evidence that these creatures are real. Before you leave, you take a moment to look over the newspaper that mentioned the werewolf story last time. So the title of the newspaper is Werewolf Case in Defiance Not Viewed Lightly by Police. Chief City's Concern Over Reported Sightings of Large Beast Attack. That's definitely something interesting to go and check out. Maybe you'll finally be able to get some real proof. Let's get going now to Defiance, Ohio. Rolling down your window, you pass by many factories of different types, with white smoke that billows up into the air before dissipating. Your car flies over hills as you glance out at the farmlands growing a variety of crops. The leaves on the trees are a vibrant green, the branches moving in the wind as you pass by them. The cooling breeze keeps the summer heat at bay as you roll into Defiance in your shiny orange Volkswagen Beetle. It's a small, sleepy, Midwestern American town with a little over 16,000 people living there. Glancing down at the newspaper in your passenger seat, you know you need to find the man that the article mentions having seen the werewolf to try and get the most accurate story possible. Why don't you go ahead and try talking to some of the locals? Where would you like to go? So, 4 options. The market, the doctor's office, the carpenter's shop, and a local farm. Raise your hand if you want to go to the market. Okay, what about the doctor's office? All right, the carpenter's shop, and farm. All right, farm definitely on that one. Down to page 9 I go. There we go. You decide to make your way over to the edge of town where many of the local farms are located. If there were some sort of werewolf, it would make sense that they would go after livestock first. As you're driving along, you notice a young farmer leaning up against a fence post and decide to pull over and ask him some questions. You roll down your window as he comes over to greet you. Howdy there, out of town. Name's Marco O'Brien. Something you need? Yes, I was hoping you could point me in the direction of market. You try and make it sound like you're not just some crazy person looking for werewolves. Can do. Just follow this road for a couple of miles, and it'll be on the right side. Thanks. You know, I was out here driving around when I overheard something about a werewolf attack. You experienced anything? Marco eyes you up and down. You a reporter? Nope, just passing through. Well, I haven't experienced anything. All of my cows are here and everything seems to be in order. No, don't get me wrong. It's not that I don't think Ted didn't see anything. It's just I don't think he saw a werewolf is all. What do you think he saw? I don't know. Could have just seen a person. It was late at night after all. The howling that he says he heard was probably just those damn coyotes. I'm gonna move all my cows into the pen closest to the house, just to be on the safe side. Alrighty then, thank you for the directions. No problem. Have a nice day. You too. Curiosity satisfied, you head back into town. It's around lunchtime now, and the carpenter shop seems to be closed for a little while. Where would you like to go next? So, places that are open. At the market, you got the doctor's office. Raise your hand if you want to go to the market. Raise your hand if you want to go to the doctor's office. Okay, I think market won that one. Page 11. There we go. You figure that it might be a good idea to stock up on some supplies at the market before you do very much else, as you're not sure how long you'll be staying in town for. After grabbing all of your groceries, you decide to have a chat with the woman at the counter, wearing an apron with the logo of the market on it. You hope she'll be able to help you with your investigation. Hey, this may be an odd question, but I heard some locals talking about a werewolf sighting. What's up with that? She looks a little agitated to make small talk with you, but sighs and answers, don't know, don't care. But surely you must have heard something, right? Yeah, I heard that Ted Davis was working the graveyard shift at the railroad just down the street and saw a werewolf. Do you believe him? No, of course not. Ted was probably just making up a story or saw something weird in the shadows. That graveyard shift can mess with your head sometimes, especially when you're alone. Besides, rumors are just a bunch of myths anyways. You pay and grab your items. Well, thank you for putting my mind a little more at ease. The cashier called to you on your way out. It shouldn't be. Just because I don't think Ted saw a werewolf doesn't mean I don't think he saw something dangerous. You pack all of your groceries away in your car and decide to talk to more of the locals, especially Ted Davis. You remember that the article mentioned something about the first werewolf sighting being around the railroad tracks, so you start driving in that direction. As soon as you pull in, you notice a head pop up from behind one of the train cars. The young man gives you a big toothy grin and heads over to greet you. Hey there, out-of-towner. My name is Ted Davis. What can I do for you? Ted was lanky and very tall, with a mop of brown hair and freckles splattered all over his face. He was so thin you wondered if he would disappear when he turned sideways. Hello there, I'm an investigator looking into these werewolf sightings. Can you tell me anything about them? Sure can. In fact, I was the first one to see these. It was July 25th, around 4 in the morning, and the moon was nearly full. A lot of times, I work the graveyard shift here on the railroad. I mean, somebody has to do it. Anyways, I was going about my business, inspecting one of the rail car's braking systems, and I saw these two hairy feet. Then I looked up and he was standing there with a big stick over his shoulder. When I started to say something, he took off into the woods. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, the thing was huge. Had to have been 6, no, at least 8 foot tall, all hunched over and such. It had these huge hairy feet, fangs, and it ran side to side like a caveman in the movies. Incredible. Do you know if anyone else has seen it? Not to my knowledge, but I will say that something strange is happening around these parts. You best be careful, you hear? Will do. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ah, shucks. You could just call me Ted. You turn away and hop back into your car, heading back towards town. It's getting pretty late now since most of your day was spent packing and driving to Defiance, so you decide to book a hotel for the night and get some rest. Just like Ted said, some weird things seem to be happening around here. You wake up bright and early in the morning, ready to continue your investigation. Maybe it would be a good idea to talk to the locals and see what they think. The doctor's office and the carpenter shop should be open at this time. Where would you like to go? So you can go to the doctor's office, the carpenter shop. Raise your hand if you want to go to the doctor's office. Raise your hand if you want to go to the carpenter shop. The carpenter shop won that one. Now I have to scroll all the way down. There it is. While you're back in town, you decide to check out the carpenter shop to see if the owner saw anything strange last night. Hey there, out-of-towner. Name's Wilford Davies. Can I get you anything? Yeah, I was wondering if you knew anything about the werewolf sightings that have been happening lately. His laugh seems to shake the tiny shop. Another one of those werewolf hunters. I'll make you a deal. Buy one of my carvings and I'll tell you what I think about these werewolf encounters. Sure. You point to a small carving of a werewolf on the shelf. Worst case scenario, you'll be able to look back on these days in Defiance, Ohio with some fondness. All right, kid. So I used to be a monster hunter back in the day when I was much younger. I'll have to tell you some of my stories sometime. Anyway, I don't believe all this werewolf talk. In all the years I was a hunter, I've never seen any hint of monster. Thanks for the help. You pay for the small wood carving. Yep, thanks for listening to me, kid. If you ever want to come back and hear some of my stories from my adventuring days, it'll be free of charge. Wilford lets out another laugh that seems to shake the world. You smile and give a polite wave and head on out. The doctor's office seems to be busy right now, but the market is open. You could probably also head to the local farm. Where would you like to go? So you got the market, local farm. Raise your hand if you want to go to the market. Raise your hand if you want to go to the farm. Guess we're going to the farm. There it is. You decide to check out one of the local farms. If there's a werewolf in town, there's bound to be some livestock that goes missing. You pass large open fields when you spot a farmer leaning up against one of the fence posts. You pull over and roll down your window. Hey there, I'm looking for directions back into town. You, again, try to make it seem like you're not just some crazy person looking for werewolves. You're not from here? No, just passing through. He eyes you suspiciously. You in town looking for that werewolf? Yeah, have you seen it? Nah, I think this whole thing is wild goose chase. I even moved my cattle further from the woods just to be on the safe side, and not a single thing happened. Take my advice, out of towner, and leave. Weird things start happening when people get scared. What kind of weird things? When people get scared, they start getting stupid. They start doing stupid stuff. You understand? Yes? Good. Follow this road north for a couple of miles, and you'll see a gas station, and that's the start of town. Have a nice day. The farmer walks back towards his house and stands in the doorway watching you leave. You think back to the newspaper with the first encounter. Maybe Ted Davis remembered something that he had forgotten to mention to you last night. As you pull into your previous parking spot, you once again see Ted's brown, curly mop of hair pop out from behind one of the train cars. He flashes you a toothy grin as he approaches you, followed by an older gentleman you don't quite recognize. Hey, out-of-towner, how was your night? It was all right, and I felt like I was sleeping on a bed of rocks. A chuckle escaped the older man's lips. Sorry, I don't think we've met. The name's Victor Garrison. The extremely thin man reaches out a pockmarked arm and firmly shakes your hand. Man, am I glad to see you. You know how I was telling you about that werewolf the other day? Well, me and Victor over here are just leaving from our graveyard shift, and last night we saw the beast again. Same time, same place. You know, like I said before, over on the rails. It was just looking at us from the edge of the forest, and it hightailed it out of there into the woods. Victor turns and points to the general area where they saw the creature. Yeah, it was very strange. It looked like a large, hairy man who stood at about 6 feet tall. No, it was more like 8 feet, but he was all hunched over. You studied the spot in the distance for a while, lost in your own thoughts. It's on the other side of those woods. Ted turns his head looking into the woods. I think Atkinson Road is over there, and the grocery store too, but I'm not sure where exactly. Well, thank you very much, Ted and Vincent. No problem. You stay safe out there. People are starting to get a little crazy. Yeah, you too. Hopping back into your car, you decide to check out Atkinson Road and the grocery store. You think that it's highly unlikely that you'll find anything, but who knows? Maybe there'll be some sort of clue. As you approach the grocery store, you notice a car that's pulled off to the side of the road with its hood up. You pull over behind the car to see if you can help out, and you approach a very short, heavy-set woman, still wearing an apron with the logo of the grocery store that was down the road. Hello, miss. Can I help you with anything? There's nothing to help with. The damn thing broke late last night on my way home, and I had to walk back. It's not super far, but my feet were aching by the time I made it home. I was hoping that I could fix it before my shift this morning, but the damn thing is done for. I'm gonna have to call a mechanic. She tosses her red hair out of her face and grimaces. Did you say last night? Yeah, why? Did you happen to notice anything strange? She tenses for a moment. How'd you guess? Apparently, some guys on the railroad last night saw something take off into the woods. It wasn't just something, it was a werewolf. You're certain? Absolutely. So just as I was saying earlier, my car broke down sometime late last night, and I didn't have the light I needed to fix it. I decided it would be best to walk home. Maybe I would be able to catch a ride. I was almost back in the main part of town when something massive came charging out of the woods. It had to have been 9 feet tall and all hunched over. It was hairier than any person I've ever seen, and it was holding a 2x4. It tried to whack me in the head, but it got my shoulder instead and just ran back into the woods. It was hurting for a while, but I just took some medicine, and now I'm ready to ring. It was the strangest thing I'd seen. I ran all the way to the police station and filed a report right then and there. Did the police say if they'd do anything about it? Yeah, they said there were a couple of other people who had reported something similar, and they would be on the lookout. After I had made my report, I went to leave, but I couldn't help but overhear two officers talking to each other. They said something about werewolves not being real and some other things. But what really caught my attention was that it could have been someone dressed up in a werewolf costume that was trying to go out and hurt people. I guess it makes sense, right? That's the logical explanation, but if you ask me, there's no way it could have been a guy in a costume. I've never met someone who was that tall, even when they were hunched over. She glances down at her watch. Ah, shoot, I'm gonna be late for work if I don't leave now. Bye. The woman runs off in the direction of the store. Maybe you should talk to some of the locals and see if they've seen anything strange that night. The doctor's office and the carpenter's shop are open right now. Which one would you like to go to? So, raise your hand if you want to go to the doctor's office. Raise your hand if you want to go to the carpenter's shop. Doctor's office. You decide to head over to the doctor's office. It might be a good idea to pick up some medical supplies that would help you if you got injured. You walk inside of the clinic to see a woman in a nurse's uniform reading a newspaper at the front desk. Do you have an appointment? No, I don't have an appointment, but I was wondering if you sold any painkillers. Painkillers? Why would you need those? Well, because I just ran out and I might need them in the future. Well, I'm sorry to say that we're all out. Come back another time. You glance over her shoulder into one of the back rooms. But I see you have a lot on the shelf right there. Those aren't for sale. Why not? Well, because there's only 23 bottles left. And I can't waste a single one. I mean, what if I need them? What if somebody important needs them? What if the president of the United States comes looking for this werewolf and needs some painkillers and we're all out of them? No, you can't have a single one. I felt like the werewolf was following me last night and I think I'm going to be its next victim, which is why I have to stay here where it's safe with all the limitations to make sure that nobody steals them. You're here to steal them. I know you are. Get out. She starts screaming at the top of her lungs and you quickly leave the office and drive away in your car. You're beginning to get worried about the town going crazy. Maybe you should check in with some of the other locals. So, you got your two options. You can go to the railroad, you can go to the farm. Who wants to go to the railroad? Who wants to go to the farm? Okay, we're going to the railroad. Okay. You decide to head back to the rail yard and visit Ted and Victor. Maybe they remember something that they have forgotten to mention to you. As you pull up, you notice Ted and Victor are about to leave. Hey guys, where are you off to?
Ted chuckles and flashes you a toothy grin. Hey, out-of-towner, we were just finishing up here and heading home. What brings you back? I was wondering if you remember anything else about the creature. Well, when will I see him? Oh, sorry. When I seen him the first or second time? The second time. Not much. It's just from a distance. But the police took our statements just a little bit ago. And they said they think it's only a person dressed up in a costume. Victor lets out an agitated sigh. Yeah, because there's some 8-foot-tall teenager out there with a stick of wood terrorizing the town. You'll have to forgive Victor. He don't quite believe what the police are saying. Do you believe what the police are saying, Ted? I mean, what they said makes sense after all. If there were a werewolf, why would he be carrying a big 2x4 if he has claws and teeth? Victor glares at Ted. When we were talking to the police, you said it was a brick. No, I think I said it was a 2x4. The two continue to squabble as you quietly leave. A monster with a weapon. You always knew it was going to be risky, but you realize if you continue chasing after this creature, you could end up seriously injured. Maybe it would be best if you left town or forget about this whole werewolf business before something bad happens to you. So you got two choices. You can leave town, you can stay in town. Who wants to leave town? Who wants to stay? Guess we're staying. The hot summer air dissipates as the coolness of night creeps in, the last of the sun disappearing over the horizon. The dark forest surrounds you as you walk through patches of swaying moonlight. Out of the corner of your eye, you see flashes of darkness pass by, but it's hard to tell if it's the werewolf or just your mind playing tricks on you. You keep walking down the long beaten paths, through the stretches of moonlight and darkness, trying to get a sense as to how deep into the woods you are. As you continue walking, the trees become sparse as you reach the thin line where the forest meets the fields. The fireflies flick on and off over the sprouting bean plants, making it even harder to see if there's anyone or anything off in the distance. You sigh and turn on the heel of your foot, determined to march back into those woods to find this monster. That is until you hear a gunshot ring out and the whole world falls away. Bright lights shine over your head as you slowly blink your eyes open. A police officer is sitting by the door. What happened? How long was I out? You got shot, kid. Been out for a day or so. You glance outside at the moonlit fields. What were you doing out that late anyways? I was looking for the werewolf. Oh, you mean that person in the costume? We ended up catching them. It was just some local teenager in a stupid Halloween outfit trying to scare some people. Now that you're awake, I'm going to give you a moment to get yourself reoriented before I ask you some questions. The officer walks out and you are left alone in the white room of the hospital, staring back at your reflection as a low howl rings out across the starry night sky. Well, that's what could have happened. What about this? The hot summer air dissipates as the coolness of night creeps in, the last of the sun disappearing over the horizon. The dark forest surrounds you as you walk through patches of swaying moonlight. Out of the corner of your eye, you see flashes of darkness pass by, but it's hard to tell if it's the werewolf or just your mind playing tricks on you. As you move deeper into the forest, it grows eerily silent. It is as though the whole world is holding its breath. You tense and inhale sharply as you hear a howl come from somewhere close by. You fumble for your trusty silver knife and shakily hold it in front of you as something comes charging at you. With all of your strength, you plunge the knife deep into the chest of the beast as it collapses. It lets out one last ragged breath before going still. You did it! You discovered proof that werewolves exist. In the upcoming days, you are celebrated as a hero and pioneer. You become the inspiration for many other monster hunters looking to put their names into the history books, and you continue your search for cryptids and adventure even into your old age. Well, that's what could have happened, but here's what really happened. The hot summer air dissipates as the coolness of night creeps in, the last of the sun disappearing over the horizon. The dark forest surrounds you as you walk through patches of swaying moonlight. Out of the corner of your eye, you see flashes of darkness pass by, but it's hard to tell if it's the werewolf or just your mind playing tricks on you. You continue wandering deeper into the forest, letting your instincts guide you. Your eyes flick back and forth as you search for any sign of the werewolf. That is until you hear a deafening howl right behind you. The werewolf growls as you turn to face it, staring into its amber eyes. Hello there, you smile. The werewolf snaps at you and you take a step back. I'm not here to hurt you. I only want to talk. The werewolf's eyes seem to widen in surprise, but it doesn't drop its defensive stance. You see, I'm a shifter, like you.
and I can't have you going around exposing our existence to the world. So I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. We'll relocate you to a safer spot where you can be truly free to be yourself." The werewolf lowers his head and seems to nod in understanding. "Then let's be off. I'm sure we can be out of this crazy town before sunrise. You should have seen how many people here have guns. It's a little concerning." The werewolf seems to let out a little chuckle as you head in the direction of your orange Volkswagen Beetle, your eyes flashing in amber color. Well, that's what could have happened. Or did it? The choice is yours to make. Thank you.